AITA for refusing to let my boyfriend's sister live with us after she lost her job, even though he begged me to say yes. I, 30F, have been living with my boyfriend, Mark, 32M, for about 4 years. We share a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city, and we've built a stable routine. I work as a software engineer, and Mark works in marketing. We both value our privacy and our quiet evenings at home, and we've created a home environment that suits our lifestyles. Recently, Mark's younger sister, Leah, 27F, lost her job. Her company downsized, and she didn't have savings to cover rent, so she was about to be evicted from her apartment. Mark called me one evening, explaining that Leah had nowhere to go and asking if we could let her stay with us just for a little while until she got back on her feet. He emphasized that it would be temporary and that she would contribute to rent and help around the apartment. He said it would be good for family support and that I should trust him on this. I was hesitant from the start. I explained to Mark that our apartment isn't very big, that having another adult living with us could disrupt our routines, and that I value the quiet and structure we've built. I also reminded him that temporary arrangements often extend longer than expected, and I didn't want to risk tension or stress in our relationship. Mark got frustrated, insisting that Leah really needed our help and that this was a family obligation. He said that refusing would make me seem cold and selfish, and that he didn't want to go through this without me agreeing. I tried to compromise. I offered to help Leah find a short-term rental or sublet, contribute to a security deposit, or even help pay for a few weeks of temporary accommodation. I also offered to help with groceries or transportation to ease her transition. I told Mark that I wanted to support his sister, but that having her move in full-time wasn't something I was comfortable with. He insisted again, saying that the stress would be minimal and that Leah was responsible and clean. He said we should do the right thing because family matters more than comfort. After thinking about it overnight, I told Mark I couldn't say yes. I explained that I wasn't refusing to help Leah, but that our home and our routines couldn't accommodate another person indefinitely. I emphasized that I was willing to help in other ways that didn't disrupt our living situation. Mark reacted badly. He accused me of being selfish, uncaring, and unsupportive of his family. He argued that if the roles were reversed, he would expect me to support my own family without hesitation. He even said that our relationship might suffer if I didn't agree. The tension didn't stop there. Mark called our parents, explaining the situation and telling them that I refused to help Leah. They called me, asking why I wouldn't support family in need, saying it was a moral obligation to let her stay. Some of our mutual friends also reached out, saying I should step up and that family comes first, especially in a crisis. I felt cornered, but I still maintained my stance, offering the same alternatives I had before. I tried to explain that my decision was not about Leah as a person, but about protecting our household and relationship from potential stress. Leah ended up finding a temporary sublet through a friend of friend. It's smaller and more expensive than she wanted, and she had to move in with very little notice, but she has a place to stay. Mark has been distant with me since the disagreement. He hasn't spoken much outside of necessary conversations, and our dynamic feels strained. Leah seems frustrated as well, and I get the sense that she thinks I didn't do enough. Some friends and family have made comments implying that I failed as a partner or that I'm not family-oriented. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I know I made a responsible choice. Allowing Leah to move in could have led to weeks or months of tension, arguments, and disruption of our routines. Our apartment is small. It would have been difficult to maintain privacy and space. On the other hand, I feel guilty seeing Mark upset and Leah struggling, and I worry that my decision may have damaged my relationship and their perception of me. I've tried to help in other ways, but it hasn't seemed to matter. Some friends tell me I was right to set boundaries and that agreeing to let Leah move in could have caused resentment or problems in the long term. Others say I should have prioritized family and relationship loyalty over comfort, even temporarily. I've thought about whether I could have handled it differently, perhaps by establishing strict rules or a clear timeline, but I worry that even a short-term arrangement could have ended badly and created tension between Mark and me. So, AITA for refusing to let my boyfriend's sister move in after losing her job, even though he begged me to say yes, and instead offering support in ways that didn't disrupt our apartment and routines. I want to help and maintain good relationships with both Mark and Leah, but I also need to protect my home, independence, and peace of mind. Was I wrong to prioritize boundaries over immediate family obligations in this situation? If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious. When do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to let my teenage son get a tattoo, even though he insists it's important to him. I, 42F, am a single mother to my son, Ethan, 16M. He's a bright, sensitive kid who excels in school, plays soccer, and has a close group of friends. We have a generally good relationship, though like most teenagers, he's testing boundaries and figuring out his independence. Recently, however, we've hit a major conflict over a tattoo he wants to get, and it has caused serious tension in our household. Ethan came to me a few months ago, saying he wanted a small tattoo on his forearm. He described it as a design that represents a personal experience he had with a mentor who passed away. Initially, I was taken aback because I have strong feelings against teenagers getting tattoos. My concerns aren't just about aesthetics. I worry about permanence, regret, and the risks associated with the procedure, including infection and potential interference with future opportunities. I told him I needed time to think about it and suggested we discuss it further. Ethan was persistent. He researched reputable tattoo artists, asked about pain management, and even showed me examples of similar tattoos done professionally. He argued that this tattoo was meaningful, not impulsive, and that it would help him remember an important part of his life. He also said that some of his friends had tattoos at his age and that he felt he was mature enough to make this decision. I explained that while I understood the sentiment, I could not consent to a permanent modification of his body while he was still a minor. I told him that tattoos are a lifelong commitment and that his tastes, priorities, and perspective will continue to change as he grows older. He argued that waiting until he's 18 felt unfair because the mentor's influence is part of his current life, not just something he'll remember in the future. I tried to empathize, but I stood firm. The conflict escalated when Ethan began researching ways to get a tattoo without my permission. He found studios in nearby cities that allow minors with parental consent and even looked at temporary tattoos that mimic permanent designs. I confronted him about this, and he admitted he was exploring options. I explained that sneaking around would break my trust, and that trust is crucial in our relationship. He argued that if I truly cared about his autonomy, I would allow him to make this decision for himself. Family members have weighed in. My parents agree with me and have shared stories of teenagers regretting tattoos they got impulsively. Ethan's father, who I divorced years ago and who lives in another state, thinks we should let him get the tattoo if he's responsible and informed, and he has been communicating this to Ethan without my consent, which has made matters worse. Ethan uses this to argue that I'm being controlling and unreasonable, and he increasingly frames the debate as a battle over independence, rather than a discussion about safety and long-term consequences. I offered a compromise. We could create a detailed, temporary tattoo to see how he feels over the next year, or we could plan for a tattoo when he turns 18, after a cooling-off period and proper consideration. Ethan rejected both options, saying that waiting diminishes the meaning of the tattoo and that a temporary design wouldn't be the same. He started isolating himself more, spending more time in his room, and expressing frustration in ways that have created tension in our household. School has also become a point of concern. Teachers have noticed his mood swings and decreased participation in extracurricular activities. I worry that the stress of this conflict is affecting his mental health. I try to talk to him about this, emphasizing that my refusal comes from a place of care, not control, but he seems unwilling to hear it. I've also considered the legal aspect. In our state, minors cannot get tattoos without parental consent, so allowing him to proceed would put the tattoo artist and potentially me at Risk legally. I've explained this to Ethan multiple times, but he argues that we could find a loophole or go to another state where regulations are different. This adds another layer of conflict because it feels like he's trying to circumvent both my authority and legal boundaries. I'm torn because I love my son and want him to feel respected and heard, but I also feel responsible for guiding him through decisions that could have lifelong consequences. I've tried compromises, reasoning, and offering alternatives, but he sees this as a lack of trust and personal freedom. I worry about the long-term impact on our relationship if this conflict continues to escalate. So, AITA for refusing to let my teenage son get a tattoo, even though he insists it's meaningful and important to him, while he and some family members think I'm being overly controlling and dismissive of his autonomy. AITA for refusing to let my adult son move back into my house after he lost his job, even though my family says I'm being selfish. I, 49F, live alone in a 4-bedroom house I've owned for about 12 years. I work as a nurse manager, which is demanding and often stressful, so my home is my sanctuary. I like to keep it clean, organized, and quiet. I have hobbies like reading, painting, and gardening that require a peaceful environment. I also have expensive equipment, furniture, and sentimental items that I am very protective of, so I'm cautious about having people move in. My son, Ethan, 26M, has generally been independent since finishing college, but he has a history of switching jobs frequently, struggling to manage his finances, and relying on others when things get tough. I have always encouraged him to plan ahead and be responsible. I have offered guidance whenever I could, but he has sometimes resisted advice. A few weeks ago, Ethan lost his job unexpectedly. He called me, anxious and panicked, saying that he had no savings and nowhere to go. He asked if he could move into my house while he looked for work. I listened and offered emotional support, but I told him I could not accommodate him living here full-time. I explained that my house is my sanctuary, that I need a quiet environment for my work, and that having him here full-time would disrupt both my life and my routines. I also told him that moving back home could encourage dependency rather than help him regain independence. Ethan was upset. He said I was being selfish and that I was the only parent he could trust. He argued that other friends and relatives wouldn't be reliable, and that living with me was the only way to stabilize his situation. I offered compromises. I could help him pay for a short-term rental, contribute to a deposit, or let him stay a few nights per week while he got back on his feet. I also offered to help him with job applications, resume writing, and transportation to interviews. He refused all of these solutions and insisted that he needed full-time access to my home immediately. The situation escalated when my parents got involved. They called me multiple times, saying I was being unreasonable and that family should always help one another. They argued that my house was big enough, that I was overthinking minor inconveniences, and that I was prioritizing my comfort over my son's well-being. I explained that I wasn't refusing to help him. I was offering multiple ways to assist that did not involve him living full-time in my house, but they continued to pressure me. Ethan has been staying with friends and temporary accommodations, but he frequently complains about the inconvenience and expresses frustration. He texts me often, saying that I'm the only parent he trusts and that he feels abandoned. He hints that I am damaging our relationship by refusing to let him live with me. I feel torn. I love my son and want him to succeed, but I also have to protect my home, my routines, and my mental health. Allowing him to move in would disrupt my work and personal life, create stress, and could cause tension in the long term. I also worry that giving him would set a precedent, making him expect support in the same way in the future, which could undermine his independence. I have tried to help him in every way I can without compromising my home. Paying for temporary housing, assisting with moving logistics, providing guidance for job applications, offering transportation to interviews, and being emotionally supportive. Yet my family frames me as selfish for not letting him live in my house. They argue that I'm making him suffer unnecessarily, but I feel I'm balancing compassion with maintaining necessary boundaries. I have considered whether I am being too rigid. Perhaps letting him stay for a few weeks would ease his immediate stress. But I also know that my home is my refuge, and compromising it in this way could have long-lasting consequences for both my life in our relationship. I'm trying to be supportive without sacrificing my independence, but my family sees it differently and continues to pressure me. AITA for refusing to let my adult son move back into my house after losing his job. Even though he says I'm the only parent he trusts and my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to let my partner's adult son move in after he lost his job and accusing me of being controlling. I, 42F, have been with my partner, Mark, 45M, for 6 years. Mark has an adult son, Jake, 22M, from a previous relationship. Jake has lived independently for the past few years, but has had a history of struggling with responsibility and stability. Mark and I have a good relationship overall, but we sometimes clash when it comes to how much support Jake should receive. A few weeks ago, Jake lost his job unexpectedly. He called Mark in a panic, explaining that he had no savings left and couldn't pay rent for his apartment this month. He asked if he could move in with Mark and me temporarily until he got back on his feet. Mark immediately agreed, but I hesitated. I explained to Mark that while I wanted to help Jake, having him move in with us could create serious tension. Our apartment is not large. I work from home part of the time, and Mark and I have a daily routine that works well for us. I've seen similar situations in the past where young adults move back in with parents or partners and things quickly become stressful. I mentioned that Jake has a tendency to ignore house rules, spend money irresponsibly, and rely heavily on others without contributing equally. I suggested alternative solutions, helping Jake find a short-term sublet, assisting with rental payments for a temporary stay, or helping him get connected to job resources. Mark was frustrated with me. He said that Jake is family and that we have an obligation to help him. He accused me of being controlling and not understanding what it means to be supportive. I tried to clarify that my concern wasn't about being unhelpful, but about protecting our household and our mental health. I emphasized that support doesn't always have to mean moving in. There are ways to help without disrupting our home. Jake was insistent as well. He said that staying with us would be the easiest solution, that it was only temporary, and that he would be careful. I tried to explain my concerns about past behavior, and that temporary often becomes extended when boundaries are unclear. Jake became defensive, saying I was overreacting and that Mark was already on board. He implied that my refusal was unfair and controlling, and that it made me seem unsympathetic. I offered a compromise. I said we could let Jake stay for one night while we helped him secure a temporary rental or Airbnb. But Mark insisted he needed to move in immediately. I felt that if I allowed this, it would set a precedent that undermined our household rules. I also feared it would create tension between me and Mark, as well as between me and Jake if things inevitably went wrong. Mark and I argued for several days. He kept insisting that I was being cold and controlling, while I maintained that I was trying to be practical and responsible. The argument escalated to the point where he suggested I was prioritizing my comfort over family obligations. Jake started sending messages as well, pressuring me and implying that I didn't care about him or his situation. It felt overwhelming and unfair because I genuinely wanted to help, but within limits that were reasonable for our home. I tried again to find a solution that worked for everyone. I offered to pay for a temporary Airbnb or cover a portion of the rent for a short-term sublet. I also offered to help Jake with job applications, create a budget plan, and even pick him up or drop him off at interviews if necessary. Both Mark and Jake rejected these alternatives, insisting that he needed to live with us. Since then, tensions in the household have been high. Mark has been distant and passive-aggressive, occasionally bringing up the situation in ways that make me feel guilty. Jake has been sending indirect messages through text, implying that I am unkind and unsupportive. I feel caught in the middle, trying to maintain boundaries while also wanting to help Jake and preserve my relationship with Mark. I've spoken with a few friends and family members, and opinions are split. Some say I should have let Jake move in for a short period to avoid conflict and to support family. Others say my concerns are valid and that it's important to protect my home and routine, especially when past patterns suggest moving in could lead to chaos. Reddit AITA for refusing to let my partner's adult son move into our apartment after he lost his job. Even though my partner and he both accused me of being controlling and unsympathetic. Was I wrong to prioritize household boundaries and mental health over what they consider family duty, or should I have just let him move in to keep the peace? AITA for refusing to let my friend move in after a breakup, even though she promised it would be temporary. I, 31F, have been living alone in my apartment for the past 5 years. It's a 2-bedroom place in a fairly small city, and I've built a stable routine around work, hobbies, and quiet time. I value my independence and the control I have over my living space. I share my life mostly with a few close friends, but I'm very selective about who I let into my personal space. My friend Samantha, 29F, has always been a close friend, and I care about her a lot. We met in college and stayed in touch after graduation. She's intelligent, fun, and a great listener, but she has a history of unstable living situations and impulsive decisions. She's had several jobs over the years, but nothing long-term, and she sometimes struggles financially. I've helped her before in small ways, like loaning her money for rent or helping her with transportation when she needed it, but I've always been careful not to compromise my own stability. A few weeks ago, Samantha called me in tears. She had just broken up with her boyfriend of 4 years, and apparently, the breakup was messy. She said she had nowhere to go because she had been living in her ex's apartment and didn't have her own lease. She asked if she could move in with me temporarily until she got back on her feet. She promised it would only be for a few weeks, said she would help with chores, pay a portion of the rent, and not cause any problems. She was emotional, and I could hear how stressed and overwhelmed she was. I felt bad for her and wanted to help, but I also felt apprehensive because I knew having someone move in could disrupt my routine and my home environment. I told her I needed to think about it. I considered the pros and cons. On one hand, she's my friend, and I wanted to support her in a difficult time. On the other hand, I live a structured life, and I was worried about the impact on my privacy, my peace of mind, and my daily routines. I also remembered past situations where temporary stays ended up lasting months or even longer, and I didn't want to put myself in that position. After some thought, I told Samantha I couldn't let her move in. I explained that my apartment is small, that my routine and mental health would be disrupted, and that I valued my personal space. I emphasized that I wanted to support her in other ways, such as helping her find a short-term sublet, contributing to a security deposit, or helping her research temporary housing options. I also offered to spend time with her socially, take her out for meals, or help her manage some daily tasks while she found a new place. Samantha didn't take it well. She started crying harder, saying I was being selfish and uncaring. She argued that family or close friends should help in times of crisis, and that my refusal showed that I didn't truly care about her well-being. She said I was prioritizing my comfort over her immediate needs and accused me of being cold and unempathetic. I tried to reassure her that my decision wasn't about her as a person, but about maintaining boundaries in my own living space. But she was inconsolable and refused to accept alternatives. Over the next few days, the tension escalated. Samantha posted on social media about friends who don't support you when you need it most, and several mutual friends contacted me, asking why I hadn't let her move in. Some of them implied that I was being unreasonable or unkind. Our mutual friends' reactions added to my guilt, but I still felt that letting her move in would have caused stress and potentially damaged our friendship if things went wrong. Eventually, Samantha found a small sublet with a friend of friend. It's not ideal, it's farther from her job and more expensive than she hoped, but she has a place to stay. She hasn't thanked me directly for helping her look for options or for offering support in other ways. Since then, our friendship has been strained. She is distant, and our interactions feel awkward. I still care about her, and I want to maintain the friendship, but I also feel hurt that my attempts to help in other ways weren't recognized. I've thought a lot about whether I was wrong. I feel like I made the responsible choice, prioritizing both my well-being and the stability of my home while still offering meaningful support. But I also feel guilty because she was in a difficult situation and probably expected more from me. Some friends tell me that I did the right thing by setting boundaries and not putting myself in a stressful situation, while others argue that I should have made the sacrifice for a close friend in need. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend move in after a breakup, even though she promised it would be temporary, and instead offering support in ways that didn't disrupt my home or routine. I want to help her and maintain our friendship, but I also need to protect my living space, independence, and peace of mind. Was I wrong to prioritize boundaries over immediate emotional or practical needs? AITA for refusing to lend my best friend money for a business she insists I invest in. I, 34F, have been friends with Claire, 33F, for over a decade. We met in college and have been close ever since, sharing countless experiences and supporting each other through major life events. I consider her one of my closest friends, and I've always been generous and supportive in both emotional and practical ways. However, a recent conflict regarding money has put a significant strain on our friendship. Claire recently came to me with a business idea she's passionate about, a small boutique that combines artisanal goods with a cafe. She was very excited, talking about her vision, potential profits, and how she's already done some research and networking. After explaining her plan, she asked if I could lend her $20,000 to help cover initial startup costs, claiming that the loan would allow her to secure a location and purchase equipment quickly. She insisted it was urgent because she had found a property she considered perfect, and that delaying would mean losing the opportunity. I was immediately hesitant. I make a decent living and have some savings, but $20,000 is a significant amount, and I have my own financial obligations, including a mortgage, retirement savings, and monthly expenses. I explained that I couldn't commit such a large sum without seriously jeopardizing my own financial stability. I also asked her if she had explored alternative funding sources, such as small business loans, crowdfunding, or investors, and she said she had, but the terms were not ideal or would take too long to secure. Claire became emotional. She argued that she trusted me more than any bank and that I understood her vision better than anyone else. She implied that refusing to help would be a lack of faith in her capabilities and our friendship. I tried to clarify that my hesitation wasn't about trust or belief in her business, but about the risk involved. I reminded her that I've seen small businesses fail despite careful planning, and lending her this amount without formal agreements would put me in a vulnerable position. The conversation quickly escalated. Claire said that if I didn't help, I was being unsupportive, and that our friendship was less meaningful than she thought. She mentioned that she's helped me in the past, both financially and personally, and implied that it was now my turn to reciprocate. I felt uncomfortable with this framing because I've always been willing to assist her in ways I could manage, but this was far beyond what I can reasonably afford. I suggested that I could support her in other ways, such as helping with budgeting, planning, or promoting her business once it opens, but she dismissed these alternatives, saying they weren't enough. Things worsened when she started bringing this up to mutual friends and family. She framed it as me refusing to support her dream and being cold or selfish. I received messages from people encouraging me to reconsider, which added pressure. I explained my reasoning each time, that lending such a large amount without safeguards would be financially risky, that I'm not in a position to act as her investor, and that there are other ways I can support her. Some understood, while others seemed to side with her emotionally. Claire has also suggested formal agreements, such as signing a contract or setting repayment terms. But even with those measures, I remain uncomfortable. My concern isn't just about repayment. It's also about the potential damage to our friendship if the business fails or if disputes arise. I've seen too many situations where money between friends leads to resentment, arguments, and estrangement. I tried to express this to her, but she accused me of overthinking and being overly cautious, saying that this opportunity might never come again. Since this conversation, our interactions have become tense. She's distant, makes passive-aggressive comments about my lack of support, and seems disappointed in me. I've tried to maintain normal communication and express interest in her progress, but it feels like nothing I do is enough. I also feel stressed and anxious every time I think about the potential fallout, both in terms of friendship and family perception. I've considered whether I'm being too rigid or unwilling to take a risk for someone I care about. I understand that opportunities like this can feel time-sensitive and important, and I want to support her aspirations. However, I also have to consider my own financial security and the long-term implications of lending such a substantial sum to a friend, no matter how close we are. I've offered alternative forms of support that don't involve risking my stability, but she sees these options as insufficient. So, AITA for refusing to lend my best friend $20,000 for her business, even though she insists it's urgent and claims that not helping would mean I don't believe in her or our friendship. AITA for refusing to let my adult daughter move in with me after she broke up with her boyfriend, even though my family says I'm being selfish. I, 52F, live alone in a 4-bedroom house that I've owned for about 15 years. I work as a software consultant and spend a lot of time at home, so my house is more than just a living space. It's also my workplace and my sanctuary. I like order, routine, and quiet, and I've invested a lot in making my home comfortable and functional for both living and working. I have expensive furniture, electronics, and art pieces, so I'm very cautious about having other adults live here. My daughter, Rachel, 28F, has been independent for most of her adult life. She finished college 6 years ago and has had a series of jobs, some stable, some short-term. She's intelligent and capable, but tends to lean on others emotionally and sometimes financially when stressed. I've always encouraged her to develop independence, manage her finances, and handle her life challenges on her own. About a month ago, Rachel called me upset. She had just broken up with her boyfriend of 3 years, and the breakup was messy. She said she didn't have anywhere to stay immediately and asked if she could move in temporarily while she figured out her next steps. I listened and offered emotional support. I told her I could not let her move in full-time. I explained that my house is my sanctuary, that my work requires quiet and focus, and that having her living here indefinitely would disrupt my routines and personal space. I also told her that moving back home could make it harder for her to regain independence and handle her life challenges on her own. Rachel became upset and insisted that I was being selfish. She said I was the only parent she could trust and that she had nowhere else to go. She argued that living here temporarily was essential for her to recover emotionally and figure out her next steps. I offered compromises. She could stay a few nights per week, I could help her find a short-term rental, or I could contribute financially to help her cover a deposit on a new place. I also offered to help with job searches, budgeting, and emotional support. She refused all of these options and insisted she needed to live here full-time immediately. The situation escalated when my sister and mother got involved. They called me repeatedly, saying I was being unreasonable and unkind. They argued that families should always support each other, especially in times of crisis, and that I was prioritizing my comfort over Rachel's well-being. I explained repeatedly that I wasn't refusing to help her. I was offering multiple ways to assist that did not involve her living full-time in my house, but they continued to pressure me. Rachel has been staying with friends temporarily, but she frequently complains about the inconvenience and expresses frustration. She texts me often, saying that I'm the only parent she trusts and that she feels abandoned. She hints that I am damaging our relationship by refusing to let her move in. She has also made subtle comments on social media implying that I am selfish and unsupportive, which has caused tension in our family. I feel torn. I love my daughter and want her to be happy and secure, but I also need to protect my home, my routines, and my mental health. Allowing her to move in would disrupt my work and personal life, create stress, and could cause long-term tension if conflicts arise. I also worry that giving in would set a precedent, making her expect similar support in the future whenever she encounters problems, which could undermine her independence. I have tried to help her in every way I can without compromising my home, paying for temporary accommodations, assisting with moving logistics, offering guidance for job applications, helping her budget, and providing emotional support. Despite this, my family frames me as selfish for not letting her live in my house. They argue that I am causing her unnecessary suffering, but I feel I am balancing compassion with maintaining necessary boundaries. I have questioned myself. Maybe letting her stay for a short period would relieve her immediate stress. But I also know that my home is my refuge, and compromising it in this way could have lasting negative effects on both my life and our relationship. I want to be supportive without sacrificing my independence, but my family sees it differently and continues to pressure me. AITA for refusing to let my adult daughter move in after a breakup. Even though she says I'm the only parent she trusts and my family thinks I'm being unreasonable. AITA for refusing to let my brother's dog live with me after he said he'd abandon it if I didn't. I, 35F, have a younger brother, Tom, 32M, who has always been a bit irresponsible when it comes to long-term commitments, especially with pets. He's had a few dogs over the years and has returned or rehomed them for various reasons: moving, financial constraints, or loss of interest. I, on the other hand, have always loved animals and have been very careful about adopting pets. I currently have a 4-year-old Labrador named Max, and I am very involved in his care. I've built my life around a routine that includes him, and I'm not someone who takes pet ownership lightly. 2 weeks ago, Tom called me in a panic. He said he could no longer care for his dog, a 3-year-old rescue named Buddy, due to work demands and his upcoming move. He asked if I could take him in temporarily, just until I get settled. I told him I would need time to think because my apartment is already adjusted to Max's routines, and adding another dog is not a trivial decision. I explained that introducing another pet would require time, effort, and potential lifestyle adjustments that I might not be able to manage on short notice. Tom immediately escalated the situation. He said that if I didn't take Buddy, he might have to leave him somewhere he shouldn't, implying he might abandon the dog. I was shocked and upset because this is exactly the kind of irresponsibility that had caused previous issues with him and his pets. I told him firmly that I would not accept a dog under the threat of abandonment. Taking in Buddy under those circumstances would create stress and potentially enable irresponsible behavior. Tom accused me of being selfish and unloving toward animals. He said that families should help each other and that I was prioritizing my convenience over the welfare of his dog. I tried to explain that I wasn't refusing to help. I was refusing to enable dangerous behavior. I offered to help in other ways, assisting him in finding a reputable shelter or rescue organization, posting on local pet adoption groups, or even helping pay for a temporary boarding facility while he got settled. He dismissed all these suggestions, insisting that I was making excuses. I stood my ground and told him that I could not take him Buddy because it would disrupt Max's routine, my work schedule, and my personal life. I reminded him that owning a pet is a long-term commitment and that it isn't fair to the animal or to me to take in a dog under duress or threat. Tom became very angry and said I was heartless, cold, and ungrateful for the sacrifices I'd already made for him in the past. He accused me of being controlling and said that if I truly cared about him and animals, I would just say yes. Since that conversation, our relationship has been strained. Tom has made passive-aggressive comments about me in front of mutual friends, saying I'm selfish and uncaring. He also implied to our parents that I refused to help him, even though I offered multiple alternative solutions that would ensure Buddy's safety. I feel hurt because I genuinely try to help, but I cannot compromise my household, my dog's well-being, and my own responsibilities. I even reached out to some friends who are animal lovers for advice. They told me that my approach was reasonable and that taking in a dog under threat of abandonment would likely create more problems than it would solve. They emphasized that helping doesn't always mean taking on someone else's irresponsible choices, and that ensuring Buddy goes to a safe environment is more responsible than letting him live with me under duress. Tom, however, continues to frame the situation as me being selfish. He says I am choosing my comfort over the life of an innocent dog, and that I am letting him down when he needs me most. I feel stuck because I do care about both Tom and Buddy, but I also feel that accepting this responsibility under these circumstances is neither safe nor fair. I don't want to risk Buddy being stressed, Max being unsettled, or myself being overwhelmed. I also tried compromise options, suggesting that I could foster Buddy for a weekend while he secured a long-term arrangement or paying for professional temporary care, but Tom refused. He insisted that he wanted me to take him full-time, immediately. I told him again that I could not, and that my refusal did not mean I was abandoning the dog. It meant I was insisting on a responsible, safe solution. Reddit AITA for refusing to let my brother's dog live with me after he threatened to abandon it if I didn't, even though he accused me of being selfish and uncaring. Was I wrong to prioritize my dog's routine, my household, and responsible pet ownership over his demand, or should I have just taken Buddy in to avoid conflict? Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to lend my cousin money for a house deposit, even though she insisted it would be just a loan. I, 34F, have always been careful with my finances. I work as an accountant and have been saving diligently for years to eventually buy my own home. I live alone in a modest apartment in a mid-sized city, and I have a routine that balances work, social life, and personal projects. My cousin Rachel, 29F, has always had a very different approach to money. She's smart and ambitious, but tends to be impulsive with spending and has bounced between jobs over the past several years. She has often relied on family for financial help during emergencies, which I've helped with occasionally, but always in small, manageable amounts. Recently, Rachel called me in a panic. She had found a house she loved, but couldn't secure a mortgage or cover the deposit. She said she had the funds for monthly payments, but needed someone to co-sign or lend her the deposit money. She begged me, saying it would be just a loan and that she would pay me back within a year. She assured me that she had a plan, that she was responsible, and that it would be temporary. She emphasized that it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for her, and that I was the only person she could ask. I felt torn. I wanted to help her, but I also knew the risks. Lending a large sum could jeopardize my savings, and if anything went wrong, I could be financially liable. I asked for details, how much she needed, her repayment plan, and what security she could offer. It quickly became clear that her plan was fragile. Her job was freelance with fluctuating income. She had other debts she hadn't paid off consistently, and she had no collateral to guarantee repayment. I told her I couldn't lend her the money or co-sign the loan. I explained that it wasn't because I didn't want to help, but because the financial risk was too high. Rachel reacted very negatively. She started crying, accusing me of being selfish, unsupportive, and untrusting. She said I was the only family member she could rely on and that my refusal was hurting her chances of securing a home. She insisted that I was overreacting and that she would never let me take any real risk because she was committed to paying me back. I tried to reiterate my concerns about the unpredictability of her income and the lack of security, but she wouldn't listen. She claimed I didn't understand her situation and that I was being controlling by not helping. Over the next few days, she involved other family members, telling them that I was refusing to help her in a critical moment. Some relatives expressed disappointment in me, saying that families should support each other and that I was letting her down. Others agreed that it was too risky and told her she needed to figure out another solution. The pressure from both Rachel and some family members made me feel guilty, but I still believed I was making the right choice. I couldn't risk my savings or future home purchase for an uncertain loan. Rachel eventually found a different way to make the deposit, borrowing from a friend and taking a smaller mortgage than she wanted. She was able to buy the house, but she has been distant toward me since then. She posts on social media about family members who don't support you when it matters most and has been cold during family gatherings. I try to maintain contact, congratulating her on her new home and offering small support in other ways, like helping her move boxes or giving advice about budgeting for homeownership. She has been polite but distant, and I feel like our relationship has been strained. I feel conflicted. On one hand, I know I made the responsible decision. Lending her a large sum of money could have endangered my own financial stability and future plans. On the other hand, I can't help feeling guilty because she was clearly in a stressful situation and might see my refusal as a lack of trust or love. I've tried to help in other ways that don't put my own finances at risk, but it doesn't seem to have been enough for her. Some friends tell me I was right to protect my financial security and set boundaries, and that lending large sums to someone with unstable finances is inherently risky. Others say I could have found a compromise, maybe lending a smaller amount or structuring it with a formal contract. I did consider that, but even a partial loan would have been a significant risk given her financial instability. I also worry that agreeing to lend her money could create long-term tension if she were ever late with repayment or needed to ask for extensions. So, AITA for refusing to lend my cousin money for a house deposit, even though she insisted it would be just a loan. I wanted to support her, but I also needed to protect my savings, future plans, and financial stability. Was I wrong to prioritize my own security over helping her achieve what she saw as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? AITA for refusing to let my roommate's boyfriend move in even though she says it's temporary? I, 29F, live with my roommate, Hannah, 28F, in a two-bedroom apartment we've shared for about 3 years. We've always had a good relationship, splitting rent and chores fairly, and supporting each other when life gets stressful. Recently, however, a conflict has arisen that has put a significant strain on our friendship and living arrangement. Hannah started dating a man named Ryan, 30M, about 6 months ago. At first, I didn't mind. She was happy, and it didn't affect our dynamic. A few weeks ago, she mentioned that Ryan was having trouble with his apartment lease and asked if he could stay at our place temporarily while he sorted things out. She emphasized that it would be short-term, maybe a few weeks, and that he wouldn't be a burden. I told her I needed time to think because our apartment is small and we already share limited common space. After some consideration, I said I could agree to a very short visit, like a long weekend, but I wasn't comfortable with a stay of more than a few days. Hannah seemed disappointed, but said she understood. I thought the conversation was settled, but then Ryan started staying over more frequently, sometimes several nights a week, without asking me directly. When I brought it up, Hannah said he was just crashing and that I should relax because it's temporary. I tried to be accommodating, but I quickly realized that the situation was affecting my life. Ryan has a very different lifestyle from us. He keeps odd hours, plays loud music late at night, and sometimes leaves the apartment messy. I work from home part-time and need a quiet space to focus, and the disruptions have been affecting my productivity and mental health. I reminded Hannah that the arrangement was supposed to be short-term, but she insisted that it was fine because he wasn't living there officially. Things escalated when Ryan started bringing friends over without asking. Our small apartment became crowded, and I felt like I no longer had privacy in my own home. I told Hannah that I was uncomfortable with this and that I expected our original agreement, no long-term stays and no unannounced guests, to be respected. She argued that I was being unreasonable, saying that Ryan needs a place to stay and that I should be more flexible since it's for a good cause. I also tried to explain that I value my personal space and boundaries and that having a third adult living here long-term would make our living situation unmanageable. Hannah accused me of being selfish and not caring about her boyfriend or their relationship. She told me that if I really wanted to be a good friend and roommate, I would allow him to stay until his lease issues were resolved. I pointed out that our apartment isn't designed for 3 adults long-term and that our lease and building regulations might even complicate having another tenant. She dismissed these concerns, saying it was temporary and I was overreacting. The tension has now affected our friendship. Conversations are filled with passive-aggressive comments and frustration. I've tried to compromise by offering to let Ryan stay for a few nights under strict conditions, such as no friends over, quiet hours, and shared chores. Hannah feels that this isn't fair and that I'm making Ryan feel unwelcome, even though I've been polite and reasonable about the rules. Mutual friends and family have weighed in. Some say I should let Ryan stay because it's only temporary and that I'm being inflexible. Others understand that boundaries in shared living spaces are crucial and that I have a right to say no to an arrangement that disrupts my life. The conflicting advice has left me feeling guilty and anxious about our friendship. I've considered whether I could compromise further, like helping him find a short-term sublet or offering financial assistance to cover temporary housing. But Hannah insists that he should be allowed to stay here. I worry that enforcing my boundaries will permanently damage our friendship, but I also feel that giving in would make my living situation unbearable and set a precedent that my space and comfort aren't respected. I love Hannah as a friend and roommate, and I want to support her, but I also need to protect my own mental health and daily routines. I've been patient and tried to negotiate fairly, but it seems like nothing I do satisfies her. I'm torn between wanting to maintain a friendship and needing to assert my rights as a tenant and individual. So, AITA for refusing to let my roommate's boyfriend move in long term, even though she insists it's temporary and claims I'm being selfish for not accommodating him. AITA for refusing to let my boyfriend move into my house full time, even though my family says I'm being unreasonable. I, 33F, live alone in a 2-story townhouse that I purchased about 8 years ago. I work from home as a graphic designer, and my house is not just a place to live, it's my sanctuary. I have a dedicated office, a small studio for painting, and a reading nook that I've carefully arranged over the years. I am very particular about my environment. I like it quiet, organized, and predictable because my work and hobbies require focus. I also have expensive equipment, furniture, and artwork that I'm protective of, so I'm cautious about letting people live with me. I have been dating my boyfriend, Jason, 35M, for about a year. We get along very well, share many interests, and have a strong emotional connection. Jason is a nice person, but he can be messy, disorganized, and inconsiderate of other spaces. From the beginning, I told him that I wasn't ready for him to move in. I explained that I value my independence and that my house is arranged for my lifestyle. He said he understood and agreed. Over time, Jason started dropping hints that he wanted to move in. He began leaving clothes and toiletries at my place, staying more nights per week, and asking if he could keep some personal items in my house permanently. I try to maintain my boundaries, but the situation gradually started to feel overwhelming. My routines were being disrupted, my kitchen and bathroom were constantly in use, and my office space was cluttered with his belongings. I realized that allowing him to move in full time would fundamentally change the way I live. 2 weeks ago, Jason asked again if he could move in permanently. He said it would make our relationship easier and more intimate, and that he wanted to share our lives in a deeper way. I told him that I was not ready for that step. I explained that while I care about him deeply, I need my own space to function, and moving in together is a major commitment that I want to approach slowly. I offered compromises. He could stay certain nights per week, we could spend weekends at his place, or we could plan for a future move-in once I felt comfortable. Jason became upset, saying he felt rejected and unwanted and left in a bad mood. After this conversation, I called my sister, Emily, 31F, to get advice. I expected her to understand my perspective, but she reacted differently. She said I was being unreasonable and selfish. She told me that if I truly cared about Jason, I would let him move in and that my fear of sharing space was overblown. She kept saying that I needed to compromise if I wanted a serious relationship, and that I was creating unnecessary conflict. Emily even implied that I was being unfair to Jason because he couldn't fully participate in our relationship if he wasn't living with me. She said that my hesitation was holding him back and that I needed to grow up and consider his needs. I tried to explain that my decision was about boundaries, personal space, and mental health, not about rejecting him or avoiding commitment. She dismissed my points and kept insisting that my comfort shouldn't come before the relationship. Since then, things have become tense. Jason seems frustrated and has started spending more time at his own apartment, and I feel the strain whenever we communicate. Emily continues to make passive-aggressive comments like, "You're going to regret this, and if you loved him, you'd make space." I feel caught between wanting to maintain my boundaries and not wanting to damage my relationship with either my sister or Jason. I have tried to show my commitment in other ways, spending quality time together, planning trips, helping him with projects, and being emotionally supportive. But it doesn't seem to matter to him or my family. They focus only on the fact that I won't let him move in. I feel like I'm being responsible and mature about this decision, but I'm being portrayed as rigid and selfish. I keep questioning myself. Maybe I'm being too inflexible. Maybe I should just let him move in for a trial period. But I also know that my home is my personal refuge, and giving in could create stress, disrupt my routines, and damage my relationship with both him and my sister if tensions arise. I want to respect my needs and boundaries while still supporting my relationship, but I feel like everyone is against me. AITA for refusing to let my boyfriend move in my house full-time. Even though my sister says I'm being unreasonable and Jason seems frustrated by my decision. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding because of her fiancé's behavior. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this, but here I am, questioning if I'm actually in the wrong. My sister, Emily, and I have always had a complicated relationship. We grew up close, but as we got older, our personalities clash more often than not. I'm more introverted, thoughtful, and careful with my words, while she's outgoing, spontaneous, and doesn't shy away from confrontation. That dynamic has created tension over the years, but I've always made an effort to maintain some level of civility, especially around our parents. Emily recently got engaged to a man named Jordan. I met him a couple of times before the engagement, and honestly, I wasn't impressed. He came across as overly boastful and dismissive, especially towards me. At first, I tried to give him the benefit of the doubt, thinking I might just be reading him wrong. I wanted to be supportive for my sister's sake. However, over the months leading up to their wedding, my concerns grew. Jordan's behavior seemed to escalate whenever he was around me. He would make subtle jabs about my career, my relationship status, and even my hobbies. One time, during a family dinner, he openly mocked a promotion I had just received, laughing in a way that made everyone uncomfortable. Emily laughed it off and said I was too sensitive, but it was humiliating. Things got worse when wedding planning started. Emily was very excited about having me involved in the process, and initially, I was happy to help. I offered suggestions for music, catering, and decorations. Jordan, however, dismissed everything I suggested. He would interrupt me, call my ideas boring, and insist that only his plans were good enough. Emily seemed to notice but always sided with him, claiming that he was just passionate about the wedding and that I was overreacting. Over time, I realized that attending the wedding might mean tolerating weeks of being belittled in front of family and friends. The final straw came when Jordan asked me to give a speech at the rehearsal dinner. He insisted that it had to be funny, personal, and roast-like, which immediately made me uncomfortable. I told him I wasn't good at public speaking and that I didn't feel comfortable making jokes at his or my sister's expense. He laughed and said, "That's what everyone wants at a wedding, funny, memorable insults." I tried to explain that I didn't want to participate in something that might embarrass anyone, but he didn't listen. Emily told me I had to do it because it would look bad if I refused. I felt cornered and anxious at the thought of being publicly humiliated. A week before the wedding, I decided I needed to make a choice. I spoke with Emily privately and explained that I couldn't, in good conscience, attend the wedding while feeling so disrespected. I emphasized that my decision wasn't about her, but about the way her fiancé treated me. I told her I loved her and wanted her to be happy, but I couldn't be a part of an event where I was likely to be embarrassed or ridiculed. Emily was furious. She accused me of being selfish, trying to ruin her special day, and said I was letting Jordan win by letting him push me out. Our conversation ended with her yelling that I was overreacting and that she didn't need me to ruin her wedding with my drama. I sent a formal RSVP declining the invitation, explaining again that my absence wasn't about her, but about my personal boundaries. My parents were shocked and disappointed. They called me several times, trying to convince me to reconsider, but I explained that I wasn't changing my mind. My father said I was being petty and allowing a man I barely know to dictate family relationships. My mother expressed that she understood I felt uncomfortable, but was worried about the long-term damage this might cause between me and Emily. Since then, the fallout has been intense. Emily has stopped speaking to me entirely. Our parents have been trying to mediate, but they're torn between understanding my perspective and wanting to preserve family harmony. Some relatives have reached out, mostly telling me that I should put my feelings aside and be there for my sister no matter what, which has only made me feel more isolated. On social media, there have been posts about the wedding where I was publicly called dramatic and accused of ruining the family vibe. I feel hurt, frustrated, and guilty, even though I know I set my boundaries after repeated disrespect. I've been second-guessing myself constantly. Part of me wonders if I should have just gone, endured the discomfort, and supported my sister on her big day. But another part knows that attending might have been even more damaging for my mental health and would have validated Jordan's treatment of me. I also worry that this situation will permanently damage my relationship with Emily, which is heartbreaking. I've tried to explain my perspective calmly to anyone who will listen, but most people either side with my sister or say I'm being overly dramatic. I want to maintain my dignity and protect myself from being humiliated, but I also don't want to be seen as the villain in my family story. I keep asking myself, am I really the *** hole here, or is this just a situation where protecting myself has unavoidable social consequences? Has anyone else been in a situation where you had to choose your mental well-being over attending a close family event? I want to know if I made the right decision or if I should try to mend things with Emily, despite her reaction. AITA for refusing to let my younger brother stay with me after he made a huge life mistake. I, 32 am, have always been pretty independent. I live in a modest but comfortable apartment in the city, have a stable job, and generally keep my life organized. My younger brother, Jake, 26M, on the other hand, has always been more spontaneous. By spontaneous, I mean impulsive to the point of recklessness. He's had a string of short-lived jobs, some failed relationships, and recently got himself into a lot of financial trouble. About a month ago, Jake made a choice that completely shocked me. He had been dating this woman, Lila, for about a year, and apparently, he decided he wanted to start fresh with her. Without thinking about consequences or responsibilities, he used a significant portion of his savings to buy a car he couldn't afford, booked a 2-week vacation for both of them in Europe, and then tried to transfer his lease obligations for his apartment onto someone else, which ended in a legal nightmare. To put it bluntly, he burned bridges, emptied his savings, and left himself in a mess. After realizing the reality of his situation, Jake called me, practically begging me to let him stay at my apartment for just a few weeks until he got back on his feet. My initial reaction was mixed. On one hand, I feel protective toward him and understand that everyone makes mistakes. On the other hand, I have boundaries and personal space that I value highly. In the past, I've let friends crash for a couple of days, but months-long stays are a completely different situation, especially given the pattern of irresponsible behavior. When he arrived, I had already made it clear that he could stay, but under strict conditions. He would contribute to groceries, help around the apartment, and importantly, he needed to have a clear plan for finding work or a stable place to live. For the first week, things seemed okay. He helped cook, cleaned occasionally, and seemed genuinely stressed about his mistakes. But then, things started slipping. He began borrowing money from me under various pretexts, claiming he needed emergency funds for everything from bus fare to groceries for Lila. He promised he would pay me back as soon as he got a job, but weeks went by, and he didn't even attempt to find work. My patience started running thin. The tipping point came when I caught him hiding online shopping packages in my storage area. I confronted him, asking why he was spending money we didn't have, and he shrugged it off, saying, "I just needed to treat myself. You can't blame me for wanting something nice in a tough situation." That was when I realized he wasn't taking accountability for his actions at all. I sat him down and told him that he had overstayed his welcome. I explained that I was willing to help him, but only in ways that encouraged responsibility, like helping him with job applications, budgeting advice, or temporary day-to-day guidance. I told him he needed to find his own place and support himself within the next month. Jake didn't take it well. He accused me of being heartless, saying I was his only family who could help him. He argued that since I had a stable life, I had an obligation to support him indefinitely. I tried to reason with him, pointing out that I am happy to help in ways that are constructive, but letting him live rent-free with no accountability wasn't helping him learn or grow. After a heated argument, he packed some of his things and left for a friend's place, promising to return later. I haven't heard from him much since, but mutual friends have told me that he's been complaining to anyone who will listen about how I kicked him out in his time of need. I've spoken to my parents, and they support my stance. They agree that enabling Jake's behavior wouldn't help him in the long run. However, My mother said I should consider whether I could have approached it differently, perhaps offering more structured support instead of essentially giving him an eviction notice. I feel conflicted. I want to help my brother, but I also want to protect my own mental health and boundaries. I've always been the responsible sibling, and I feel like he leans on me because he doesn't want to face the consequences of his own decisions. Yet, I worry that maybe I came across as cold or uncaring, which was not my intention. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother continue staying at my apartment after his reckless choices. I understand some may argue that family should always be supported, but at what cost? How much enabling is too much before it stops being helpful and starts being harmful? I genuinely want to help Jake, but I can't do it in a way that undermines my own stability or condones his repeated poor decisions. Since he left, I've offered to help him with job hunting and budgeting advice, but he hasn't taken me up on it. I keep wondering if I should have been more empathetic or patient, but I also know that continuing to allow him to live here rent-free would have just prolonged a cycle that doesn't serve either of us. I'm torn between guilt and self-preservation, and I can't shake the feeling that either way, someone is going to think I'm the villain. Has anyone dealt with a similar situation? How do you balance helping a family member in crisis while protecting your own boundaries? AITA for refusing to let my sister move her kids in after they caused chaos during their last stay. I, 36F, have a sister, Claire, 33F, who has 3 kids aged 5, 8, and 10. We were always close growing up, but as adults, our lifestyles have diverged significantly. I live alone in a 2-bedroom apartment, which I've worked hard to maintain. I value quiet, structure, and personal space. Claire recently lost her apartment due to a financial setback and asked if her kids could stay with me temporarily until she got back on her feet. I was hesitant because of the last time they stayed with me. About 2 years ago, Claire had to travel for work, and I agreed to watch her children for a week. I made it very clear that while I would take care of them, I had rules in place. They had to respect my home, follow my routines, help with small chores, and not bring friends over without permission. I also told Claire that I wasn't equipped to supervise them constantly for long periods, but I would help manage mornings, evenings, and school routines. Almost immediately, the kids disregarded the rules. They ran through my apartment screaming, left crumbs, spilled juice, and refused to clean up after themselves. I tried redirecting them and enforcing small responsibilities, but it quickly became overwhelming. The youngest broke a lamp, the middle child spilled paint on the carpet, and the oldest repeatedly ignored instructions, refusing to help with chores. I contacted Claire to update her, and she told me to be patient and that they were just being kids. I explained that this wasn't just normal behavior, but was disrupting my work and my home, and that I couldn't manage full-time childcare alone. By the 3rd day, I was stressed and exhausted. I was working from home, but the noise and chaos made it nearly impossible to focus. The kids started arguing and physically fighting, and I had to intervene multiple times. When Claire returned, I explained what happened and told her I could no longer host them for extended periods. I offered compromises like babysitting for a few hours, taking them to the park, or supervising them for short periods outside my home, but I made it clear I could not accommodate overnight stays again. Claire seemed disappointed, but agreed at the time. Fast forward to last month, Claire asked again if her kids could stay with me for a week while she handled another work-related trip. I immediately said no, reiterating my previous reasons and the limitations of my space and schedule. She became upset, accusing me of being selfish and not supporting family in need. She insisted that I was their only available relative in the city and that she had no other options. I tried to compromise. I offered to help her find a local daycare, arrange for a babysitter, or even help pay for temporary childcare. She refused, saying that her kids wanted to stay with me and that I was denying them a family experience. I explained again that my apartment isn't suitable for 3 children for a week and that I couldn't manage the responsibility safely. Our family has since been divided. Some relatives understand that I am protecting my mental health and home, while others think I'm being unreasonable and should make sacrifices for family. I feel guilty because I care about Claire and her kids, but I also know my limits. I cannot put myself in a situation that could lead to property damage, excessive stress, or potential harm to anyone involved. AITA for refusing to let my sister's children stay with me after a previous visit went poorly. I've tried to offer alternative support and solutions that don't involve hosting them full-time, but Claire insists that staying with me is the only option. I want to maintain a good relationship with her and her children, but I also need to respect my boundaries and protect my home and well-being. Has anyone else had relatives who repeatedly asked for childcare that exceeded their capacity? How did you handle saying no while preserving family? Relationships? I want to support my sister without compromising my sanity or living situation, but I feel torn because of the pressure from her and other family members. AITA for refusing to attend my cousin's wedding after what happened last year. I, 28F, come from a pretty tight-knit family, at least on the surface. We all live in the same state, and we usually get together for holidays, birthdays, and significant life events. My cousin, Lena, 30F, has always been the kind of person who dominates family events. She's very loud, charismatic, and often the center of attention. Most people love her, but she can be extremely manipulative without realizing it, or maybe she realizes it and just doesn't care. Last year, Lena got married to Tom, 32M. I was genuinely happy for her. I wanted to celebrate with her, so I RSVP'd yes to the wedding and even bought a pretty expensive gift, a piece of jewelry that I thought she'd really like because it matched her taste. I also spent a lot of time picking out an outfit, traveling to the venue, and getting ready for a day that I assumed would be enjoyable. When I arrived, the atmosphere fell off almost immediately. Lena's bridal party, which included a lot of our mutual friends from childhood, was very cold toward me. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe people are just stressed before a wedding. During the ceremony, everything went smoothly, and I was trying to enjoy the moment. The problem began at the reception. Lena made a speech thanking everyone who supported her and Tom, but I noticed she didn't mention me at all. I wasn't expecting a shout-out, but when she started going down the list of people who contributed to the wedding, she included people who barely did anything and ignored me completely. That hurt, but I tried to keep it to myself. Things escalated during the dinner. She had assigned tables, and somehow, my name ended up at a table with people I didn't know. Most of the other cousins and family friends I was close with were at a different table, right next to Lena. I asked if I could move to the other table, but she waved me off and said, "Oh, it's fine. You'll make new friends." I tried to make the best of it, but everyone at my table was either indifferent or slightly hostile. One person even whispered to another guest that they didn't think I had contributed much to the wedding. I was humiliated. Then, during the dancing portion, Lena asked me to help coordinate a dance game. I agreed because I wanted to help, but it quickly became clear that she had set me up. The game required couples to come forward, and she made a comment about how some people clearly didn't bring the right energy, glancing directly at me. The crowd laughed. I froze, feeling everyone staring at me, and I quickly stepped aside. People tried to be polite, but the vibe was off for the rest of the night. The final straw was the gift situation. When the couple opened gifts publicly, Lena seemed to notice mine. She held it up and made a sarcastic comment about how, well, at least it's shiny. The audience laughed again. I was mortified. I had spent hours picking something meaningful and thought it was thoughtful. After that, I quietly excused myself from the reception and left before the dancing ended. I didn't say anything to her about it right away. I figured she might have been stressed, and maybe she didn't intend to hurt me. Wedding because apparently the first was more of a legal formality, and this one is the real wedding, which is even bigger and more expensive. I got the invitation in the mail a few weeks ago, and I'm already dreading it. My parents think I should go to keep family harmony, and some cousins have texted me saying it won't be as bad and that I should just forgive and forget. The issue is I don't want to go. I genuinely don't feel safe in her presence anymore, and I don't trust her not to humiliate me again, either intentionally or accidentally. I've explained this to my parents, but they say I'm overreacting and that weddings are supposed to be joyful, not a platform for grudges. I offer to send a gift and a heartfelt card instead, but they insist that my absence will be noticed and could cause a scene. I also thought about sending a polite RSVP decline, but I'm worried that Lena will see it as an insult or that family gossip will twist it to make me look bad. On the other hand, attending feels like I'd be opening myself up to being mocked again. I've considered just going quietly and avoiding her, but she's the type of person who dominates every corner of the room. I don't think I could avoid her. I've been debating this for weeks, and the more I think about it, the more I feel justified in refusing to attend. It's not about holding a grudge. I honestly just don't feel safe and respected in that environment. I don't want to be humiliated in front of people I care about, and I don't want to participate in a celebration that would likely bring back last year's trauma. So, AITA for refusing to attend my cousin Lena's second wedding after what happened at the first one. I'm trying to balance family expectations with my own mental health, and it's honestly a mess. My friends say I'm not the asshole and that it's reasonable to set boundaries, but I feel guilty because I know my absence will be a big deal to my family. I just don't know if I'm making the right choice, and I'd like to hear outside perspectives. I want to stand up for myself, but I also don't want to be labeled as dramatic or difficult in the eyes of the rest of the family. Has anyone else dealt with this kind of family wedding drama? How do you draw the line without creating more conflict? AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay at my house during his break from her. I, 32F, have always considered myself the responsible one in my family. My parents passed away when I was 25, and my younger sister, Mia, 28F, has always relied on me more than anyone else. She's sweet, but she's the kind of person who avoids confrontation at all costs. And as a result, she's often been taken advantage of by friends, coworkers, and even past partners. I've tried to guide her through life, from career decisions to relationships, usually stepping in as a kind of buffer when things got messy. It's exhausting, but I do it because I love her. Recently, Mia got engaged to a man named Tom, 30M. I hadn't met him much before the engagement, but I tried to give him a fair chance. He seemed charming at first, funny, outgoing, and successful, but over time, some red flags started showing. For example, he had a habit of joking in ways that were cutting and personal, and he tended to gaslight her when she voiced concerns. Mia brushed these off, saying she loved him and he wasn't perfect, but it worried me. The situation escalated when Mia went on a 2-week business trip last month. 2 days after she left, Tom called me. He sounded desperate and asked if he could crash at my place for a few days because he and Mia had had an argument and he needed to cool off. I was taken aback. I didn't know the details of their argument, and I didn't feel comfortable inviting him in my home while my sister was away. I told him I wasn't comfortable with that and suggested he stay at a hotel. He insisted, claiming he didn't want to burden Mia's parents, who live in another state, and that he really needed someone to talk to. I stuck to my boundary and said no. Tom got upset and started calling me all day, leaving long voicemails, and even texting Mia while she was on her trip, asking her to convince her sister. I felt like I was being manipulated, and I refused to engage. I blocked him temporarily, then unblocked him after Mia returned, hoping things would calm down. When Mia came back, she seemed happy and unaware of the intensity of his requests while she was gone. I tried to explain why I didn't feel comfortable letting him stay over, but she seemed defensive, saying he just needed a friend. I can't believe you wouldn't help him. I told her that while I understand needing a friend, I didn't feel responsible for taking care of someone who was acting in a manipulative way, especially since it wasn't my conflict to solve. Things escalated further during a family dinner. Tom showed up uninvited, and when he saw me, he immediately started trying to guilt me about not letting him stay over. I told him firmly that I would not host him. Mia tried to mediate, but ended up yelling at me in front of everyone, accusing me of being unsupportive and controlling. My parents aren't alive to weigh in, so this felt like a betrayal from my only remaining family member. I ended up leaving the dinner early because I couldn't handle the tension. After that incident, Mia and I have barely spoken. She accuses me of being unreasonable and cruel, and Tom says he can't believe someone would treat family that way. Meanwhile, my friends and coworkers think I'm overreacting because I should support my sister's fiancé, but I feel like this is more about boundaries than loyalty. I keep questioning myself. Am I being selfish for refusing to let him stay? I'm concerned about Mia's relationship and Tom's behavior, but I don't want to be seen as the villain who is tearing the family apart. At the same time, I don't want to compromise my sense of personal boundaries and let someone manipulative into my home. I feel trapped between loyalty to my sister and loyalty to my own judgment. I also can't help but notice that every time I set a boundary with him, he escalates his attempts to manipulate the situation, and Mia seems to side with him without listening. To my perspective, I've tried talking to her calmly, but she either deflects or accuses me of being judgmental. Even my friends are divided. Some say I should just let him stay and avoid drama, while others say I'm right to protect my home and my peace of mind. So, AITA for refusing to let my sister's fiancé stay at my house during their argument, even though he claims he just needed support while Mia was away. I feel like I'm standing up for myself and maintaining healthy boundaries, but I also feel like I'm losing my sister over this. Is it unreasonable to expect someone to not bring emotional manipulation into my home, even if they're family-in-law adjacent? The tension has created a rift that I fear may never heal. Mia has started avoiding me entirely, and every family interaction now carries an undercurrent of hostility. I keep replaying the situation in my head, trying to imagine what I could have done differently without compromising my principles, but I honestly don't see a middle ground. This has left me emotionally drained. I want to support my sister, but I also can't ignore red flags that I see clearly. I've considered family counseling or mediated conversations, but Mia has refused to go, saying she doesn't need an outsider to validate her feelings about Tom. I'm left wondering if standing up for myself is worth the cost of my relationship with my sister. I know she's important to me, but I also know that letting someone manipulate me would create a worse scenario down the line. I realize this story might sound biased since I'm seeing things from my perspective, but I want honest judgment. Did I handle this poorly? Or am I justified in saying no to someone who was trying to guilt-trip me into letting them stay while my sister was away? Should I have found a compromise? Or would that have only enabled further manipulative behavior? I honestly don't know if this can be repaired, and I'm torn between feeling like I did the right thing and feeling like I may have lost my sister because of it. I keep hoping that time will heal the rift, but I'm terrified that it won't, and that my insistence on boundaries has permanently damaged our relationship. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.